Warning. The following video contains strong language that some viewers may find offensive or disturbing.
What was the "Please Stop" school presentation that you witnessed? Was in a video film making class in high school. One group of guys did a parody of those Gatorade commercials where the athlete's sweat is colored like Gatorade, but it was a sweaty guy jerking off. Apparently there was a Gatorade cum shot, but the teacher just turned that shit off immediately before it got that far. For 8th grade talent show, 2 girls sang the Mr. Bladell song. Mr. Bladell was a good-looking, recently college-graduated teacher that basically was about how cute they thought he was. Even then, it was incredibly uncomfortable, and I remember looking at the teacher's face and he didn't seem very amused. Once in college I was in my Spanish class and our desks were in a U shape. I was on the very end of the U. So some guy is giving a presentation. He is standing behind a podium. Gets a boner. I'm on the side and no one is opposite so I can see it. Dude just kept going on and on and on. I think he was trying to outlast the boner. He ended up getting it down before he had to sit down. Was like a 10 minutes presentation that only needed to be like 3 minutes though. Edit, presentation was in Spanish too. For a public speaking class in college, we had to give a persuasive speech. One kid did his speech about porn. If he had had a legitimate argument, like sex work is real work, or porn has a negative affect on a person's self-image, the speech would have been fine. We were all mature adults. But all he did was list the different kinds of porn he liked, in detail. With visual aids, the professor stopped him after a few minutes, and asked him to explain what he wanted to persuade the audience about. He answered, "Porn is good." Single quote. Not a literal presentation really, but we had an assembly in high school where the students that helped plan homecoming would announce the nominations for homecoming court. It always had a cute little theme and like a short skit involved. Well, at one point the audio they were using as the cue for the skit failed. They just kind of paused for technical difficulties. But this one girl from the planning committee started singing a random Disney song a cappella while improvising a dance to go along with it. I guess as a distraction from them trying to fix the audio? She kept trying to get people to join in with her. But nobody did. And she eventually just kind of trailed off mid-song and started pouting that nobody would sing with her. Then once they got the audio fixed for the skit, she pouted and snapped the way through the rest of her lines, which made everything even more uncomfortable. The other famous one was when a girl in our class running for student government referenced a hashtag that she was trying to make popular during her campaign speech to the whole school. The hashtag was something catchy about her having a big ass. There was a genuine collective yikes from the crowd when she said it. I don't think she got elected. Opioid awareness. Literally a few months ago. Started with them blasting the entirety of the Disturbed cover of The Sound of Silence, while a slideshow of images containing sad stock photos with the watermark all over. Random shots of really dark nighttime photos. And tons of poorly photoshopped drug images trudged on ever so slowly. Then, 2 women told us the harrowing stories of how their sons died of opioid overdoses. Incredibly emotional. Several people cried. Real downer. Basically. Then, a DEA agent comes up and tries to act all bad cop. He calls us an assembly of high school students. Grades 9 to 12. Fucking morons. The principal was not pleased. He is then followed by a nurse who was there to tell us the physical effects of opioid addiction and withdrawals and all that. And she did talk about that. But the whole time she was running around practically screaming jokes and doing shitty over-the-top gags trying to be the comic relief. In an opioid assembly, where 2 women shared the stories of how their children died. What the fuck was she doing being that loud and crazy? Everyone came out of the whole thing with a general attitude of yeah, fuck opioids. But also fuck that whole presentation. In high school a student died in a car accident where she was driving. There was no record that stated she was distracted by her phone or anything. But the school decided to have an assembly shortly after talking about distracted driving and using her as an example. telling the whole school she'd be alive if she was doing what she was supposed to. Not a presentation, but during our school assemblies we often had student performers, which were usually musically inclined individuals or theater kids doing a scene monologue. One kid decided to do a stand-up comedy routine about a girl giving him a blowjob. So awkward, and the principal had to interrupt him. The one where my school got ripped off by paying a guy who claimed to be on SpongeBob to come talk to us about drugs. He did look kind of like Tom Kenny, I guess. I was also thinking backward about the question. I thought op meant when did the school have to tell everyone to quit doing something. For me it was banning Pokémon cards in 1998 because toddlers were brawling over that first edition Charizard. During nursing school a guy decided to use My Little Pony figures as props to a seminar room of about 100 people. He told the class that he would refer to himself as his pony name for the duration. Don't remember what it was. Also, not that this is relevant, but he wore a black leather trench coat and it was pretty hot in the room, yet he never took it off. Cringe. Edit. He wasn't a student, he came in to do a talk about epilepsy and his experience with healthcare. We got to review them at the end and I gave him a good score because he actually had a lot of interesting things to say about his condition even if it was cringy. In my high school current events class, 2 freshman girls got a little lost in their research about ISIS. They somehow connected this terrorist group to the magic bullet theory used in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Me and the few other seniors were holding back laughter the entire presentation. Had to look it up, apparently there are some fringe groups actually promoting this as a thing. What the hell world, what the hell. I was in a Japanese film class for a credit I needed and the final project was some open-ended paper where you got to choose the topic, and our Japanese-born teacher told us some story about a creepy neckbeard who did his on Japanese porn and how no one should do anything like that. Anyways, on the day it was due the creepiest neckbeard stereotype I've ever seen. Who was in my class presented his long-ass cringe presentation on Japanese porn in the class that no one wanted to hear. Already knowing the teacher has seen this shit before and wasn't about it at AskReddit. Just to clarify, his main talking point was about how Japanese people have a greater appreciation for big boobs than Americans. It wasn't some academic treatise on sexual norms or gender expectations in porn or anything. I went to school for computer security. In an Introduction to Computer Security course, we had to do a project on social engineering. A student decided that for his project he was going to find a way to gain access to a chosen website. He found a small local business website, identified that the domain was registered to an email address from a local ISP, called the ISP to reset the password. They asked him for his last 4 of his SSN. So he hung up. He found the phone number of the business, so called them and pretended to be from the ISP, offering 3 months free if the person did a 5-question survey. They accepted, and answered some BS questions. Then he asked for the last 4 of the guy's SSN, which they gave no problem. He then called the ISP with the last 4. Got them to reset the password of the email account. He then logged into the email and used it to get the domain registrar to send a password reset to the email, which he used to reset the password of the domain account, and deleted the email. He recorded all phone calls and screenshotted the whole process as he presented all these. We kept expecting him to say, but that would be illegal, so I didn't do X. But he went all the way. The professor finally stopped him after he said he logged into the domain registrar and told him to destroy everything and never speak of it again. I think the professor was a bit nicer than he could have been. Potentially to the point of accomplice telling him to destroy evidence. In history class, we all had to do a presentation about some sort of injustice in the world. One kid chose a prison camp for his topic. All his PowerPoint slides were photos of men being stripped, chained, whipped, sodomized, and forced to give blowjobs. We were 13. Edit. Yes. His project was about Abu Ghraib. Late to this, but grade 12 advanced placement English. We were assigned books, then had to do a presentation on a topic somehow related to it. The book I was assigned was The Stranger by Camus. So I presented on existentialism in literature. One girl was assigned Animal Farm. She started her presentation on kinds of tractors used in farming. She hadn't read the book and assumed it was about actual animal husbandry. It was a very long presentation. The teacher had to actually hide her face. Student gave a presentation on the need to strap laser beams to deer heads that trigger sonic waves so that the deer are detracted from crossing highways. Context: I wasn't the grading teacher, but I was asked to supervise the teacher. Theme was supposed to be on how to solve a problem youth is facing X. How to be a solutionary. Student was in 10th grade. Edit, simplified it for you slow readers. Winking face. But the presentation was hard to follow, so therefore hard to explain. It was almost 15 minutes and begged so many questions it's not even funny. An anti-bullying campaign. They spent most of the presentation explaining different types and ways to bully, harass people. Bullying increased in school and everything got 10 times worse now that the students were more educated on the subject. This was a Spanish class in college. And I think the assignment was something like talk about your best friend or some such. Just kind of a softball assignment so you could practice using the vocabulary. And one classmate's friend was evidently a friend with benefits. Not at school, but when I was in high school my church youth group went to this church camp. For those uninitiated, Thursday nights are normally the really emotional nights. Well, this camp was different. Thursday night the guy that started the camp comes on stage and begins giving a bunch of middle school and high school boys and girls the sex talk. All I remember from that night was the quote, "Just because there's a hole there doesn't mean you have to stick something in it." Compared to some other stories in here, this is minor. But it was a group project for one of my literature classes. There were 5 people in this group. According to the rubric for this assignment, everyone was supposed to have equal speaking parts. One of the members in this group would just not stop talking. Half of their presentation was just her talking, and she went on about each of her slides for like 5 minutes. The rest of her group members had like 1 or 2 slides each. And she had IIRC 5 or 6. She would also interject into the other group members' parts to add her opinions. The look on my professor's face screamed, "Just shut up already," every time she talked. My sophomore year we had to make a presentation about any person that made an impact on the world that was inspirational. Someone chose Hitler. This was my presentation, and it was about the science behind how Mountain Dew can dissolve a mouse. This was in 4th grade. Needless to say I got some parent complaints. Some guy in my class, about 12 to 13 years old, confused heroic and erotic. The teacher asked if he really read an erotic book and he said yes. As the student watched in disbelief, took the teacher 30 seconds to catch up the misunderstanding. A teacher asked up to compare the cells in our body to anything we can think of. Obviously some students compared the parts of the human cell to schools, jails, libraries, normal things, right? Well, this one student that sits next to me had a different idea. These were group projects, keep in mind. This girl managed to strong-arm her group to compare the human cell to the infamous webcomic Homestuck. She did this successfully. Not only did I feel dirty, but her group felt worse for having their names on it. The anti-vaxxer chick that did a presentation on why vaccines cause autism. Followed up by someone else's presentation on how vaccines do not cause autism. It was a weird day. In speech 101 in college we had to pick a children's book and voice act each character. That was it. That was the entire assignment. Well, one student decided to take it to the next level. He chose a Berenstain Bear book and decided to not only do voice acting for every single one of the characters, but also act it out. It was physically uncomfortable to watch this guy scramble around the room and pretend to be bears and other animals. It was not well done. It was awful. Environmental science. For our final project in the class we were allowed to talk about dude decides to do his project on global cooling. Buddy was up there for 7 minutes explaining to the class how the Earth has been getting colder and colder. And how it's eventually going to cause problems to other species. Teacher was really passionate about this class, and you could say her squirming in her seat the whole way through the presentation. Whole thing was a big WTF. His sources were online forums. It's me. I did this. I cringe about it to this day. Nearly 20 years later. I was 16 and in high school. My high school was going to do a spring talent show. I wanted to be in the talent show and show off my talents. The problem was, my actual talents are not ones that I could show off at a talent show. So I decided to try singing. I have never sung in my life. I have never had voice lessons. I was in my prime weeb stage and chose an anime song to sing. I didn't know any actual Japanese. I had just memorized the lyrics from hearing the song so many times. Luckily I didn't make it past auditions. But several people saw an overweight girl in a Sailor Moon shirt try to sing Butterfly despite having never done any singing or voice training ever in her life. Nearly 20 years later, and remembering it keeps me awake at night. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. See you next time.